Hello and welcome everyone to this, I can't believe it's the second year of the Truth and Reconciliation was a weekend last year. And this year it's a full week. And I am so excited to be back for the second year this year be doing a different session. Last year I did a session called Sacred Transformation, which I actually pulled one or two slides from to bring forward because it's completely relevant to today. But as I was sitting with, what could I contribute to this group of really people? What I love about Truth and Reconciliation is that partly why I like to be part of it is because it gets me out of my bubble. So like I live in the United States and I live on the West Coast. And even though I have friends all over the world, like there's like all these people from all over the world talking about things I know nothing about. And it just like I feel like there's like so much juicy exploration happening here and so much like willingness to share, and that the people that are coming and the people that are speaking, they're doing it because they believe that we can actually create and we are creating that. We are creating. Nilima, who's one of the founders, and I often talk about, we're like, okay, so which team are you on? Are you on team deconstruction? I'm going to take down the old systems. Are you on team kind of midwifing? I'm here to kind of help usher people through the transformation. Or are you on team rebuild and redesign and reimagine? And so I feel like I am on team reimagine and redesign. And I've been in this kind of midwifing team, taking people over, taking myself over the last 20 years or something like that. And I feel like we're at this point on the planet that all of us and all of the, whatever has been your journey to get here, and maybe just to take a moment to just presence for yourself the spiral of growth and evolution and awakening and awareness that you've been on that's got you here to this moment. It's one of the things I love about the feminine, and our session today is all about the power of feminine presence and leadership. And when I say leadership, I mean, are you the leader of your life? When I say leadership, I mean it's a choice. It's not a position. It's not a job. It's not letters after your name. It's, do you choose to step forward first as the leader, co-creator, maker, designer of your life? And then do you choose to take the presence that is you and the gifts that you uniquely have and use it to make and co-create whatever reality we're all here creating together? And so one of the things I love about the feminine is that she works on a spiral. The shape of the feminine is a spiral. There's value in linear lines. They get us from point A to point B, can be very helpful, especially if you're going to the airport. You don't really want to be on a spiral. You want to be in a straight line. But when you think about the journey of your life, and I think of it, I think I don't know if mythopoetics call it this, but this is what I call it, a soul spiral. And if you think about, you started here at the center as a seed, and you could just take your fingers, and you can even do this if you want to with me. It's kind of like our opening meditation here, just to like see the rings that you have walked around and the journey that you've taken that has got you to this point. And what I love about the spiral, so start to notice, is that it has its own momentum. Do you notice like it starts to get bigger all by itself? You don't have to push it. You don't have to force it. You don't have to bankroll it. It just starts to get bigger with its energy. And you also notice how you come back around to spots. You're like, hey, I've been here before. And maybe you've done the thing where like, I've gone backwards. I'm dealing with the same crap I dealt with 10 years ago. And it's like, no, honey, we're at a different part. We're at an elevated level, and we get to come back and look at the same parts and the same pieces, but from an elevated lens. And so my hope and my intention for our session tonight is that each of us can embody ourselves as leaders as I think we have all women here tonight, but of course the feminine is not just about being a woman. So, but here for us live are all of us as wise women, wise beings, why people with wisdom within you. And also to come both with that deep knowledge and like I have it's not earned the right, but it's kind of like I have, a couple of the age spots. I have maybe a couple of the wrinkles. I have maybe a gray hair or two, or whatever it might be. That what I love about the teaching about wisdom specifically is that wisdom requires experience. And so that you get to come tonight, not as a person who's just going to listen to learn, although that's part of it, that you get to first come as the wise being you are and the wisdom that you bring. That's the power of, if I could make Zoom put us in a circle, I would make Zoom put us in a circle. I can't quite figure that out. And that you also come tonight with curiosity and with openness, and that like that innocent, that what they call the beginner's mind. And my superpower, my gift, my part to play, and if you were to think of all of us like a circle, and I think of the bigger truth and reconciliation community also as a circle, and in the center of the circle are, like what I see for this community is we have this common belief that we can create a world that's rooted in wholeness, sustainability, inclusion, belonging, love, peace. And it's not like some whoo, pie in the sky, everybody, kumbaya. That's like not what we're talking about. It's like, no, like for realsio. Like it actually, if humans have the power, if everything on the planet that is not made by Mother Nature was literally created by humans, then that means we actually have the power to create whatever reality we choose. So if that's true, then if there's enough of us that actually believe and live and practice, not as like, I always say, this is not the Joan of Arc lifetime. This is the Jedi lifetime. So Joan of Arc is like, da, 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 charge, I have to do it all. I gotta exhausted. I have to fight. I have to rant. I have to rage. Not that there's not times for sacred rage, and not times for filling the space with that holy sacred rage, or what I would call the fierce feminine. But we cannot waste our chi and our life force and our energy screaming into the void, fighting against big, huge systems that don't want to change. And this is the good thing, we don't have to in this lifetime. Not this time, maybe we kind of all have before, but we're at this other point right now where it's like our power comes from the collective. It's like a bee swarm, it's like, someone might not be so afraid of a bee or two, but if you get like a swarm of bees, like you're maybe, I gotta go, right? So there's like that, that's like that for us. And I was just watching this documentary or a TEDx talk about what humans can learn from bees. And they were talking about this woman who I think she lives on the East Coast. I thought she maybe lived in Colorado, Rebecca, but she lives on the East Coast. And she was talking about how the hive decides a new hive, like they're going to move the hive, and all these bees come back, they're little scouts, and they go out and they all dance little dance to the new little hive. And then the others start dancing it, and whatever has like the most dances, they all kind of go that way. So like there's this harmony that like gets created. And so tonight, as I share what my part is, so if I can kind of going back to this, I'm actually going to pull this graphic up because it's probably the best. I wasn't going to pull this one up, so give me 1 second. The best glyph I have of this. Then we'll dive in, and hopefully this is meant to be much more interactive and self-reflective with me giving you all a couple models. So let me just hold on a second. Let me go to my Dropbox. Okay. So this is an image from my most recent book, Overwhelmed and Over It. Some of you will note this, for those of you that have actually read the book or are reading the book. But this is the best example of this, kind of as we go into tonight's conversation. So the glyph on the left is what, when we think about the feminine, like feminine leadership and feminine, or if we even this energy of the nurturer, the giver, the compassionate, the empathy, a lot of times when I'm working with women that are working within organizations, they describe themselves as the heart of the house. And so we have these huge hearts, and we can see and we can feel all the things that are going on in the world. And so we end up looking like the woman on the left, who is, we call her the three-headed overwhelmed woman. And we can feel and see all the different things that that are distorted in our world, that don't have to be that way. So the animals are dying, and the weather is crazy, and the financial system, and the earth, and the people, and the water, and then just your own life. And so we feel that in our energetic field, in our psychic field, in our emotional field, and then we feel like we have to do something about it. And whether if you break this down to the micro level, like in your own family, or in your own company, or in your own team, or in just like your ecosystem that you work in, this happens on all those different levels. We basically, your light's not going to shine, it's going to burn out. And so one of the 6 key principles of feminine leadership is personal sustainability. I start everything I do, which is probably why I'm starting here, when I speak about feminine leadership, from personal sustainability. Because I actually don't believe we can create a sustainable reality if we ourselves don't learn and actually take a stand for, I want to make an impact in this world, but not at the sacrifice of my own health, my own wellness, my relationships. And so that's been the way that many of us have operated. And because we've had to, and we were imprinted for that. We were imprinted both from that self-sacrifice place of like, I'll just take it all on. Suck it up. A good woman gives and she gives and she gives and she gives, or the nurturer or the provider. There's lots of different ways that shows up. Or like, I'll just take it all on. I'll be the super person. I'll keep the burden. And I'm inviting us all to move over to this side. We're just going to glide right over. I call it gliding with grace over here to this side, which is focus on my part. And so I want you just to take a look at this glyph, and I'm curious, I'd love to just hear a couple shares about what you see about this reality that says focus on my part. I know my part. I value my part. My part is enough. These are glyphed by my visual thinking partner, Catherine Torini, who did all the glyphs for my Overwhelmed and Over book, and you'll see all the other glyphs. She does a lot of the glyphs for my feminine leadership work. So I'm just curious, some shares. What do you see about this reality over here, about each of us focusing on our part? You can go ahead and speak into the space.
For me, the first thing I noticed is like the sacred geometry and
just say your name and where you're from, just so we can get a sense of where you're at in the world.
I'm Rebecca and I'm in California. And what stands out is the flower of life and the sacred geometry that's just holding us all together, and we're all a part of it, but no one's holding it up. We're all just flowing with it, and that's what I see.
I love that you saw the flower of life. One of the glyphs I work a lot with is the flower of life, because it's said to be so if you take a piece of sacred geometry and you look at it and you meditate on it, apparently it's supposed to open up wisdom within you. So I'm like, why not? I've tried this stuff. I'm like, I don't know, who knows, right? Yeah. But if you look at the flower of life, one of the things that I was taught about it was that it is the path to creating and co-creating in joy. The path to creating and co-creating in joy. And the equation, so I have a little coaster that has the flower of life on it, and on the back is one of the equations that we are in the process of working into reality in feminine leadership. So I'll share this with you all now. You can write this, you should write this down. It is do less, receive more, achieve a greater impact. Do less, receive more, achieve a greater impact. And I say this is kind of like, I feel like it's like, Einstein EMC squared. Like, I don't know how long he worked that, equation, but it was a long time, and it feels like that. It feels like, so I give that to you as an equation Like, I don't have a 7-step process for that's if you just do these 7 things, this is what it looks like. But how I use that equation is I will literally stop myself as I'm making a decision, as I'm creating something, as I'm doing something, and I'll go do less, receive more, achieve a greater impact. Do less, receive more, achieve a greater impact. So it's like a working equation that helps us do that. And then you layer on the joy part of like, how does this actually feel in my body? Am I pushing? Am I forcing? Am I striving? Am I grinding? If you feel those things, you stop, you stop, drop, you stop and drop and find the flow. So it's like, that's how I'll say, okay, if I feel the grind, I feel this drive, I feel the push, which the reason I teach feminine leadership is because I was born ahead of myself. And I was born, I really good at pushing and driving and forcing and striving. And so and we'll talk about that when we talk about the power spectrums today of like, how do we do that differently? But just like to make a note, okay, if I feel the force, the drive, the strive, I'm not doing this. I'm over there. I'm in the 3-headed woman. And to stop and ask the question, why am I pushing? Why am I pushing? And what would be in the flow? Why am I pushing? All right, what else? Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca?
So
Oh, wait, how many? Wait, I think we have we have multiple Rebeccas. Rebecca number 2, and then who just spoke?
Karen.
Karen. Okay, it would be Rebecca number 2, and then Karen.
Excellent. Well, I'm always in the company of good Rebeccas. There's never enough Rebeccas as far as I'm concerned. The other piece, I also saw the Flower of Life, but the other piece that I noticed, and I think Monica's on here too, is that women are fundamentally weavers, and that each person weaves their piece, right? Like that these women are each holding their piece that they weave, right? And that's enough, because you're weaving, if you're we are weaving just what we have to weave. Like, you can't weave everything. You just weave together the pieces and parts that you can weave together, and then it joins all of the pieces together. So that's what comes to me, because that is my part is enough. That is truly that.
Yeah, I love that. It's like, Rebecca, I see like you're over here, you're saying, I know my part, I value my part. And then like, I'm over here and I can see Rebecca. I'm like, Rebecca's got her part. That means I got my part. Awesome. And I don't have to run over and be like, hey, Rebecca, you should do it this way. It's like, just, it's not, and we're always like, when people say, oh, just stay in your lane, I'm just like, oh, like X-nay on the lane A's. In feminine leadership, we actually look at how we design things in a circle, right? So you can see all the other parts and pieces. And Rebecca, I adore you and I adore your work, and it's so good to know that you're here doing it, so that I don't have to, and you don't have to do my part, but we can still
Exactly right.
collaborate, right? Like, that's the other part. I think this kind of melts away some of that competition.
Yeah, and I think that also, like, during this pandemic, of course, like, there's been a little bit of prepping, right? Like, I've got the toilet paper. Do you got the rice? Like, what can we share, right? Like, so that's that too, right? Like, how do we, I've got this piece. Do you have the wood? I've got the water. That's that piece as well that women fundamentally also understand how to do, right?
It's beautiful. So. Thank you, Rebecca. And I love that you have 2 Rebeccas right next to each other. That's beautiful. All right. And was it Karen?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm Karen from Northern California, and underneath the geometry and the weaving is the foundation of the spiral and the feminine, right? And so even though you have your framework, right, of how to work, it's all underneath holding it together and keeping things in alignment and in the flow is that spiral, right? So you see a very complex process, but it feels gentle and supportive.
Everyone take an exhale. And you can take maybe another one, and just as we're dropping in. So I love that you presence the spiral, Karen, because the way that this whole session is designed is on the spiral. We're dropping in, we're slowing things down, and just to take an exhale and like literally let your diaphragm relax. Just releasing the pressure that we hold in that power center in our body. People often ask me if there's a book they can read about the feminine. I'm like, yes, I have some good seminal books. I've written some to myself, but the feminine is embodied. She's not an idea in our head. It's the feminine energy is an embodiment. And so just choosing to release that pressure in our power center, and also just take another breath, and maybe even just put your hands kind of like right on your hips. Just kind of exhale out the breath and the energy that you might be holding in your pelvis. Hold a lot of energy in our pelvic floor. And the yogic wisdom teaches that if your pelvic floor is not flexible or strong, it's really hard. It's your foundation, kind of the word you use, Karen. And so it doesn't allow you, if you don't have that strong foundation, it's really challenging to manifest in your most powerful expression in the world. And so many, especially people we have these hearts, we want to help the world, we want to share, but we don't create the foundation underneath us, and we're over here trying to do it all. If we don't have those relationships, the home, the health, the financial material support, we're just not going to A, be as effective, but B, we're not going to make it. We're going to make ourselves sick. And so this really isn't just about self-care. The cornerstone of feminine leadership that I'm inviting us all into is to consider moving yourself over to this spot, and the focusing on my part. And so my question for you, and this again, to write this down, this is self-reflection, is standing right here today, and I'm going to take this down, standing right here today, we're at the center of 2021. We're one full cycle between now and June solstice, mid-year 2022. And one of the things that I see happening is that we are being asked to release the parts that are no longer ours, to stand even more fully in the parts that are. So these are the two questions. Professionally, what is no longer your part to play? Professionally, what is no longer your part to play? And I'm looking down here at Miss Karen Davenport, who we emancipated her from a job that was not working for her into being able. And Karen, I hope it's okay. I'm going to share this story when we went through this. Of like, I remember us. You were actually here, sitting right here in this spot. And someone had said to you, what do you mean you're going to leave your career? You're going to leave that all behind? Like, how could you leave all your career behind? You just spent 30 years building that career. And we said, and I said to you, I said, you can't leave your career. You are, it's in you, all that experience, all that everything, it goes with you. And career is just path. So in the distortion of the overculture, career means they changed the word career to mean to move along at an expedient pace. But the root of the word career is path. And so if you think about this for yourself, your part, the part that you're here to play, and if you remember the woman, they were holding something on their left and their right. The left is what they're receiving, the right is what they're giving. So the giving is how you give your gifts in the world. The receiving is what your curriculum is, which is why I love Truth and Reconciliation. And Neely and I talk about this often, even though we didn't know we were both downloading it this way, of like, we have to heal and do our own inner work and expand to be visible and use our voices and our presence to give our gifts in the world. It's both that giving and receiving. And so what is it that you're called to release professionally that's no longer your part to play? And then what is your part to play? What is your part to play as we go into this next cycle and these, kind of years to come? But just like this next year, like you can feel like this is my part to play. Like I'm being called to step into this part even more. And if you want to type that into the chat of like what I know, what I know my part is to play professionally and what I know my part is no longer. And then I'm going to invite you to do the same inquiry for yourself personally. And so think about this in terms of mostly your relationships is usually where it shows up. So this could be in your family relationships. This could be if you're a mother and how because mothering and parenting changes over time as your little people grow. It could be in a beloved relationship. It could be with friends. It could be like, but thinking about your relationships personally, what is no longer your role to play? And maybe even thinking about roles that just don't fit anymore, or maybe you've taken more on even just in the last year, the last couple years, and being like, actually, this role is like, this is no longer my role. And what is my role to play personally in my relationships? And Cheryl, I'm just wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about this, so to give everyone a little chance to journal and put them into the chat, and then we'll move on to the next model. You got an extra bonus model. I wasn't planning on sharing that, but in the feminine, you really never know what is going to show up. We just have to be empty and see what wants to come through. So that's the bonus model, and then we'll drop into power, power spectrums, and then the archetypes next.
Okay, so Christine, did you want me to share
Yeah.
my experience?
So this is everyone. This is Cheryl Shartle, and Cheryl is one of the co-founders of the Elevate Feminine Leadership Councils, and also has been living the feminine for many, many, many years, and the integration of both. And so I asked her to be here today to kind of co-facilitate. And what I love about working this way is that Cheryl and I have very what would you call it, Cheryl? Fire and water. Fire is the masculine, water is the feminine. We need both. We can both go to distorted places. I can go to the fire a lot more. Cheryl can go to the water a lot more. So we tend to have very different experiences in how this all showed up. And so when I gather us like this, I like to invite someone like Cheryl who she has a different lens on how all this shows up for her than it shows up for me. So that's also part of why we're doing it. Plus, as women, it's just fun to play together. I don't know about all of you, but I'd always rather do it with somebody else. If you would share an example, and then I love Karen's. I've seen people post. There's up here on the chat.
Yeah. So thank you, Christine. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with all of you tonight. And, for me, at the center here of 2021, just, professionally, what is no longer my part to play. And it's taken me a couple of years to really come to this, is it's no longer my part to actually be an owner in my family business that I've been a part of since I was literally 10 years old and been in my current role, for about 35 years. So, that became clear to me a couple of years ago. And so I started to work on, the weave into the exit plan. And so, and what I'm sensing into is now mine to do. My part is, to step out of that family business, very intense business, and into work that I'm deeply passionate about around girls and women, working with girls and women in leadership, and being the leaders of our lives, not only in our companies but in our families, in our relationships, in our communities. And all of that certainly didn't happen overnight, but it definitely happened with inquiries like this, going in and really sitting with these deep and profound inquiries is how I came to this. I could feel it in my body. I could feel something was off. I could feel, while I loved what I do and love my family, I could feel it in my body. and I could feel kind of like this, almost like this low grade sort of agitation, and maybe lack of enthusiasm. And I really thrive on enthusiasm and collaboration and coming together like this. And yeah, so that's my story. You're muted, love.
For sharing that. I do this, it's kind of like called the shedding. We do this every July in my feminine wisdom school. We really literally ask, what are the roles and the responsibilities that I'm releasing, and what are, and you think of a snake. So the snake is also very connected to the feminine. The snake sheds her skin as she's growing her new skin. So she doesn't rip her skin off and then go, woo, I'm naked, and then just leave herself susceptible to everything. She's doing both at the same time. So as you're looking at this, like I'm loving, Karen Faber, I love her, like I'm leaving the crazy person, working person behind. And I just had this total visual. Like when you see her, what does she look like?
Hair on fire. Rah! Snakes coming out, like, I don't know, just crazy.
Not the good kind of snakes. Yeah.
No.
So it's like literally like taking that off of you and saying that literally is not my role. And what will happen is the roles will try to come back and get you. The parts will be like, oh, and they tempt you. They're like, oh, like Rebecca, I can see you over there. Like, oh no, just come support me, Rebecca. No, Rebecca's like, no, I am here to shine. I'm like not behind the scenes anymore. And so just to start to notice, the first step is just choosing to release. And then what will happen is it will come back to you. And sometimes you might pick up a little bit of it, because it's not like all of it is, it's like, but it's like you got to be, that's that part of deep self advocacy, which is also part of the feminine of self love. At the root of everything I believe in leadership is self love, from wholeness, of like, actually, I'm not going to take that on. And then knowing there'll be somebody else that will. And that's part of why we take it, right? Because we think someone else won't. And then why I'm asking you to ask the question when you find yourself stepping into that, ask before you do it, like, why am I taking this on? Why am I pushing? Why am I striving? Why am I saying yes? And there'll be a deeper piece under that. And that's where we're going to go next. And so the thing that I can say with all my heart is, underneath all overwhelm, all self-sabotage, all doing too much, all misalignment, all of it is the heart. And to just get to know your heart better and how it works, and be that advocate for yourself. And I love that Rebecca says, if someone doesn't know, no, yes, exactly. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. I was just talking to a client of mine who's a doctor, and she has been plugging the holes in the university she works in for 3 years. And she's like, it's all falling apart. I'm like, good. As long as no one's dying and it's not a person, let it fall apart, and then someone else is going to have to fix it, or not, or not. So, all right. So deep breath, everybody, and just take a moment here. We're gonna, I'm gonna shift us into, so when I teach feminine leadership, and why we started with personal sustainability, just to underline it, is that it is like, you can't be our most powerful selves, and we can't be in our most resonant, impactful presences if we ourselves are not sustained. And so choosing to focus on your part, both professionally and personally, and doing it with grace is not just an act that is sustaining you, it's actually part of sustaining everything. And if you ever feel guilty about it, this is my teaching on guilt. Guilt, unless you've killed someone, you've stolen from somebody, or you've just cheated somebody or lied, guilt is a distorted response. So you can just ask yourself, next time you feel guilty about not saying yes to something, you're not taking something on, you say, did I lie? Did I steal? Did I cheat? Did I kill someone? If those are not the 4 things, then that is not, that's a distorted response. And then you can just really ask, what am I really afraid of? or like go deeper into that place so that we can step forward in a different way of operating. So I'm going to pull up this glyph. I used this glyph last year just to give a sense. Can you all see this? Yes?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yes.
So, that three-headed lady, she feels a lot of this stress from the planetary, social, and systemic stuff that's going on. And if my perspective is, if we focus on everything that's wrong in the system, the social, the planetary, we will exhaust ourselves. But we're experiencing change on all these different levels. But these levels down here, personal, relational, and generational, and this is why I love truth and reconciliation from the inside out, that's the social, the systemic, this planetary change, it shifts and changes when we work at this level. And if we focus here, it actually fuels all of this. So just taking a moment for yourself to give yourself some acknowledgement about how you have already been contributing to a healthier planet, to a more just social system, to systems that are based in wholeness by the work that you've done, because you wouldn't be here today if this wasn't true, on the inside out, in your own person, in your relationships, and also just generationally, whether that's in your own family or it's through the work that you do in the world. And so just take a moment and acknowledge yourself for the healing you've done and for the leading you've done. And because that's been part of your part, my invitation to you is to value it right now in this moment, and to write this phrase down. I have made a difference in this world by. And choose one thing that is something personally that you have either healed, or a way that you have led, one way that you've healed something relationally, and one thing that you have healed or led generationally. So I've made a difference. I've made a difference in this world by personally. And write it down, because as soon as you say it, as soon as you make it, write it down, it becomes real, or say it out loud. And then the same thing relationally. I have made a difference in this world by healing this in my relationships. And I've made a difference in this world generationally by either healing or leading. And I'd love to either have you write it in the chat, or I'd love one or two shares. Let's start with I've made a difference. This is not the time to be shy. This is the time to say it, because then you got to feel it, because this is one of the reasons we get so burned out and exhausted, is that we don't actually acknowledge the change that we're making. And it's why, like, whenever I talk about, I say that phrase, be the change you wish to see, which we've all heard a million times. And my publisher was like, you can't put that in the book. Everyone said it 8 million times. I'm like, because it's a life directive. It's not a journal cover. It's a life directive. And if we don't embrace that, the work and the healing, I don't even call it work, the healing that you have done, that's in your lifetime, but like the last year and a half, like, oh my God, like I know all of you have done healing, whether you did it and, you're like, yes, I'm going to do healing, or like, oh, I'm going to do the healing. And to just take a moment and acknowledge this has made a difference. Look at this picture over here of the globe, like your light becoming more light and creating more light in your relationships and generations is making a difference. And until we embrace that, I don't actually think we can totally shift this up here. This is why I get like this. This is the fierce feminine. She comes through like this. So just know she gets a little fiery. And so,
Christine,
yes.
hey, Karen Davenport here.
Okay.
I'd love to share if that's okay.
Yes, I would love to.
Thank you. So as you presenced, I when I decided to remove myself from my corporate career as I knew it, thinking that was the end. Yeah, this was the end of that Karen. And what happened, just by doing it, not even announcing, very quietly doing it, but doing it with purpose and doing it in a grounded way, so many people reached out to me, and just heart to heart, in a very non-heart environment, reached out to me as that was happening, with that gave them hope and strength, and again, all very quietly happening, but I could feel it. So just the act of doing for myself what I needed was transformational for many people who've come and talked to me along the way. And that was nothing that I had anticipated. And so choosing it for myself was really, had an effect on others that I did not anticipate. And it keeps me going. It absolutely keeps me going. And it emboldens me to share my story to anyone who asks in a very truthful way, as opposed to making a story about what happened that might sound good. It's really been liberating. So
Thank you, Karen, for sharing that. It's reminding me, I want to say hashtag Harmonic Defiance. Hashtag Harmonic Defiance. So Harmonic Defiance is, Karen, do you want to say what it is, or do you want me to define what it is?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just say it and then you'll say it very eloquently.
Okay.
So for me, it was absolutely choosing myself when all conventional structures and wisdom and things were telling me I was screwing myself over, right? Like, don't do this. This isn't in your best interest. But I had to defy that and just be who I was and just stand in that. So that's what it means to me.
Mm-hmm. That's really well said. I just had more practice. I had to sit down and write it in the books, but I was writing overwhelmed and over. And I'm like, now I really have to make sure that the words that go in there are about what Harmonic Defiance is. What and so so to add on to that, Harmonic Defiance is the choice to defy the systems or what doesn't work for you, not by ranting, not by raging, not by having to post it on social media, not by having to be seen about it, but just choosing the path that feels in harmony for you and those you guide or lead or influence, without asking for permission or making apology. You just do it. You just
Can I say one more thing, Christine?
Yeah.
So most of me wanted to say, pardon the French, fuck it, I quit, I'm done, throw it away, walk. And that would have been an act of defiance. But by working with Christine, she showed there's a way to still take that step, but do it with grace and do it in a way that I felt honored. I was honoring myself. And so the harmonic part of it is super important. And I didn't really realize that till we were having this conversation. So I just want to say that it's when you get to the point where you just say, I quit, there's a fine, and then there's and here's what's next, because we all get there. And it was really wonderful having the support when I needed it. So I would just say that, yeah, it's so relatable. I guess it's so relatable.
And it's the perfect segue into power, because the Harmonic Defiance, one of the reasons I put it in the end of the Overwhelmed and Over book, it's in the section on Liberate Your Power. And so just think about that word for a moment, power. And what are some of the words or feelings that come up when I say that word? Power. Just popcorn them into the space. What are some words that come up?
For me, it's fear. It's a scary thing.
Inequity.
Being forced to do something you don't want to do.
These are not like, oh, let's go do that. Give me some more, right? It's like that, but this is, thank you for being real. That is like literally, so you like think of some of these words that we're putting out there, like leader, leadership. I get a lot of those also from other women, like, yeah, I'm not that, right? Or like there's this energy, and power is the same way, because the way that we the overculture, or the culture values power, it very much is like that. And we'd have to have some wine over that conversation. So we only have another 40 minutes. So that's another conversation to talk about that. But I'm going to take us into today, because what I wanted to do is bring in these two models that help us do many things, but two things. One, redefine what power is. Really redefine what power is. And I don't believe we can actually do that until we bring the feminine in, and we actually start talking about the feminine and what is the feminine. And you can't just be like, well, let's go to unity consciousness and love each other and do kumbaya. I'm like, no. Like, you can't. We actually have to, as a society and as a people, go in and like really get the duality to be able to come together to create the connection, to create that unity. There's a couple steps before we can get there. So I'm going to share this model called the power spectrum, and then we'll talk about, well, I'll share and then we'll have a brief moment, but just to kind of whet your palate with the feminine leadership archetypes, to give us some language to this, because without language, and this is my superpower, is taking deeply esoteric wisdom and translating it to make it accessible and applicable and practical to the now. So my background is I was brought up, I was bred in the business corporate MBA world. I am an 8 on the Enneagram. I have no problem with my masculine power. I have no problem with the fire all day long. I remember early in my awakening journey, I was about 35, and I was in a leadership training, which was not like on any other leadership trainings I had ever done, through the Coaches Training Institute. And it's much more about presence and opening up and who you are and all these things. And it was the second retreat. And this was before I did. So I'm also deeply trained in the sacred feminine. I always joke I studied with the Yoda of the divine feminine, because she really is like that. And my teachers are all in their 80s, and they didn't have to kind of deal with this world the way it is. They really hold and live these deep bodies of wisdom. So I'm trained deeply in the sacred feminine, deeply in yogic wisdom, and deeply in indigenous wisdom. And I kind of call them my braid. And CTI, the Coaches Training Institute, was when I did their 10-month leadership program, it was the start of this. And I remember it was the second retreat. And Henry Kinsey House, who is one of the founders of it, he's like this, I think, I don't know if he's 300 pounds, but he's a big guy. And he's just this big bear of a guy. And he had at some point basically said, Christine, just come up here and sit in my lap right now. And I want you to sit in my lap, and we're on the floor, and I want you to look out at all these 25 people. And he's 300 pounds. I'm like, I'm going to go sit in the bear's lap, but it was not comfortable. And I could just feel myself softening. And I felt vulnerable, and I didn't like it, but I was there to actually do things differently. And the day after, this woman comes up to me, and she says to me, this is not my proudest moment, but I'm going to just be real with you all. She's like, I just want to let you know, when I first met you, I was so intimidated by you. You kind of scared me. And I just want to say, you've really softened. You've really softened. And I did not take that as a compliment. I wanted to kind of punch her in the face and be like, what do you mean I'm soft? I'm not soft. That was my non-initiated into the feminine response, and early in my journey. And I was just talking to my spiritual mentor, Ariel, who is the person who I've worked with for many years now, the Sacred Feminine. We were talking yesterday or Saturday, and she gave me this reflection, and she goes, I just want to reflect to you how round your voice is now. And how when I first started working with you, it was very direct, it was very sharp. I worked from Chicago, it was hard, and it had kind of a flatness to it. And why I share that with you is that, like, because I've invited the feminine into my life, it's brought the distortions of the masculine over. So they kind of dance together now, like this beautiful partnership. And it's not an idea in my head, like literally my voice has changed. Literally, when I listen to my podcast, I'm like, am I talking too fast? Am I talking too fast? And I'm like, wow, I'm really talking quite slow, and it's like this whole other way of being. And that's my hope in sharing these models and teaching these and giving them to you as like almost like all of the pieces I've been giving you so far, they're like tools in your toolkit to take as you're driving through. And so I'm going to pull this up. This will give you a little bit of of a of a visual. Do you see the power spectrum?
Yes, we can see it, Christine.
Okay. So you could draw this on your piece of paper, and some of you are familiar with this, some of you have not seen this, some of you have seen it in other ways, but it's, so if you draw the infinity sign on its side, this is also called a harmonizer. And so the wisdom teaching is whatever you put into an harmonizer, it basically harmonizes the two forces together. So kind of like I was saying, is that I was trained to be very over here in my masculine. I was very comfortable over here. This is just kind of how I was, I was also growing up in a household with a very dominating father, and then moving to a relationship with a very controlling partner. I kind of had to be over here because it wasn't really safe to live over here. I needed to really be over here. That was the way I dealt with the world, was to protect myself. And this was a safer place to be. And what happens when you put the feminine and the masculine, well, and then, what happened is I went over here and I basically set up a tent in feminine, and I lived here for a long time, and I really embodied that. And then over time, what happened is these two integrated with each other. And so if you think of, you can even put your hands out. So the feminine, the wisdom teaching is our left side, it's the receiving side, and the masculine is the right side. But it's also like yin and yang. It's also the anima and the animus. It's also fire and water, or water and fire. And I like to think of it elementally, because it really is, the masculine is more fiery, the feminine is more watery, but together they come. And like when people ask me, like, what does feminine power, what does power look like when it's embodied in a woman? And or balanced power, and my response is always fierce grace. Fire is the feminine, or if the fire is the fierceness, the water is grace. And sometimes what we'll hear people say is like, oh, you mean like hard skills and soft skills? I'm like, no. No, the feminine is not some I give no form, and I'm just, and I'm some wilty flower over here that's submissive. Like, no, the feminine is fierce. So I don't use hard and soft. In fact, I really have a challenge with that. I think it's the wrong frame. And so the other way to look at this is that when we are able to stand, and I'm going to give you some very practical ways of what this looks like, is that when you're able to be in the feminine, when we're in the feminine and masculine, we can also move off of it into what's called power distortions. And we're not in our power then. We're not creating from wholeness, we're actually creating from the wound. So another way to look at this is when I'm creating from my wholeness, I can create from my whole feminine power, and my wholeness in the masculine, or what I call divine feminine and divine masculine. When we're operating from the wound, we're operating over here. So, like I was sharing, I grew up with a very dominant father who tried to control everything. So I would go over here. It's like, all right, I'm going to meet the bully with the bully. So that was that forceful masculine energy that came from the wound of not feeling safe. And as I came home, is the way I get to call it, to the feminine, it healed so much of that and brought that over so that I could feel safe. So like there's like the deeper healing parts of this. I'm going to stay in the more practical, but the reason I'm presencing it and why I love truth and reconciliation is like it is about healing in order to be able to lead from those parts. And we don't have to sit on a couch and talk about it for 15 years, but there is this way that we're working that by really valuing the feminine. So let's make this practical. I pulled one of the power spectrums. So I want you to write this down. And Karen, you mentioned this one. So go ahead and put intuition on the left and intellect on the right. And I'll go back here to just want to say, so when these two come in harmony, what they do is they give you access to elevated leadership. This is the place where we're really operating from wholeness. And the other way to think of it is like kayak, right? So you need both paddles. I need both paddles, the feminine and the masculine. I need both these paddles. And then but mostly I'm in the center and I'm using both. And I might have to lean more heavy on this and lean more heavy on that. But that is actually what opens up the space to create, it can lead our decisions, our choices, how we see what our perception is. And so this is one of the most basic. I have about 20 sets of that I work with, but this is one of the most basic. So feminine is the intuition on the left. The masculine is intellect. And it's interesting when I share this, especially with women, some people can get really mad. They're like, I'm intelligent. The intelligence is not about being a man. And like, this is not about men and women. This is about an energy within us that everyone has. And this is where, when I'm doing gender equity work, one of the things I teach is that you actually can't create systems and organizations that have gender equity and inclusion and are, kind of not, I don't know if you can never be bias free, but bias aware, if we ourselves don't see these biases in ourselves. And so that's part of how this helps us create organizations and families and teams and all that does this. Now if you have the intuition and the intellect together, intuition comes from the body, it comes from the heart, the intellect comes from the mind. So body, mind, heart. I'd add spirit in there too, is where the intuition comes from. When these all come together, what you get is wisdom. That's the elevated leadership perspective. And that's knowledge through experience, wisdom, a higher intelligence, something more than the mind can see on its own. And then if you look at the distortions, here's an example of like what these look like when they're distorted. So when the intellect is distorted and you're only over there, oops. Hold on. What can you all see right now? I think I just.
We can see
okay.
wisdom.
Okay. So you dismiss the feelings and things you can't prove. It's over rational. Everything has to be rational. Everything has to be logical. People, when you have an organization or you have a person that overvalues this, you can't navigate the unknown. This is why everyone's freaking out. It's like, we don't have, where do you get taught? There's no class navigating the unknown 101. Although, can you imagine if we taught people how to do that? But we don't have the skills. We don't have the teachings unless you went and you studied it on your own in the wisdom traditions. And what also can happen when you get over focused here is you create things that don't serve humanity. So remember I said the heart is over here, the body's over here, the spirit's over here. Humanity would never have created the atomic bomb if people were operating on this power spectrum. Because it might have, to the mind, been like, well, that's the only choice. We have to do that. We have to drop that bomb. But you bring in compassion, you bring in a higher intelligence, you see the meta view, you feel that it will like make people sick to like think about what they would do to other people. And then that opens up, there's another way, right? There's another way. So just take a breath and just think about maybe organizations or places or people that you've worked with that have been really over here, or maybe even how you yourself have experienced bias because you were more over here on this side. And I see a lot of times, I'll see this more so with women, where they'll speak with presence from what they know, and then they will literally say, but I don't have anything to really back that up. And then they've just washed away all of their power. And for, good reason, because those are deep societal and overculture imprints. So over here, you can also go the other way, right? So think about when you're way over here in the distorted feminine or distorted water, it's ungrounded, detached from physical reality. You misread situations. Everything's a sign, it has to be a sign. It's wishful thinking, right? It's like it's not grounded in reality. People often say, oh, you have to be real. I'm like, well, there's many different definitions of reality. Which one do you choose? And I believe like when both of these things are operating, you actually are creating a reality and wholeness. And you also get misguided timing if you're not grounded in both of these. So here's my question to you. Where do you currently fall naturally? So you draw the spiral and then put a dot where you fall now, like you currently fall naturally. Like where do you operate from most of the time? And then kind of looking back in your past, knowing that you're operating for more wholeness now than you have in the past. Where in the past did you operate from when you were a little bit more in a distortion? Like just kind of thinking back maybe 10 years or 20 years. Where did the younger you go? And you could put a little dot or some kind of mark there to kind of just say, this is the younger me. When you were showing up more from the wound. And then right now, as the person you are today, when you are in a time of stretch, where do you go? And then the last question in inquiry is, what do you do to pull yourself back to center, to bring yourself back to center? So what are some of the practices or the things that you do to pull yourself back to center? And I'm gonna give you 2 more power spectrums. So, and then we'll pause and just take a couple shares here. So go ahead and write another power spectrum. And on the left, put curiosity. That's the feminine. That's the water. And on the right, put confidence. That's the fire, or the masculine. And then the line up, the arrow up, with those two together, when we have curiosity and confidence, remember kayak, what that gives you is openness. And so when we're in distortion with confidence, it's bullying, it's pushing, it is follow me, don't ask questions, even if the whole village gets killed, overconfidence. And distorted curiosity is like water. It's just confusion. It's like flood. Like it's a flood. It's just like confusion and a flood, like overwhelm. And so looking at those again, and it's interesting if you look at those when you look at those, what do you notice about how that's held in our society? Is it better to be a person who's overconfident, or is it better to be a person who's over curious and might get confused and lost? Start to notice this. Is it better to be a person who is overly intuitive, or better and more valuable to be a person who is over intellectual and logical and rational? And when you look at that curiosity and confidence, ask the question, where do you naturally fall? Where do you naturally kind of fall? Do you fall more towards curiosity, more towards confidence, or somewhere right in the middle? Or like for me, I feel like I'm still a little bit over here to the right towards confidence. I'm not quite in the middle, but I'm close. I'm like a standard deviation or two away from it. So kind of just, where you're at right now. Where in the past, when you were operating more from the wound, were you at in that power spectrum, and make a line or make a note there for your younger self that was operating more from the wound. And then where do you go in times of stretch or stress? And you can think about that both in terms of professionally and personally, because sometimes we'll personally go to a different side and professionally we'll go to a different side. And then the last one I'll give you, I'm gonna give you this last one. I'll give you this last one for the last one is to make another power spectrum. And on the left, write unity. And on the right, write sovereignty. And the elevated leadership is healthy interconnection. You can think of that also like unity is we and sovereignty is me. It's like my first book, Choosing Me Before We. People are like, that's so selfish. I'm like, no, it's called self-love. And it's really important when you're in relationship, A, and B, it doesn't say choosing me instead of we. It says choosing me before we, because most people have to be able to, like, whatever the wound is, then to heal those wounds so they either don't give themselves away in relationship or they don't build so many walls around them that no one could get in. And so the distortion with unity is codependence, losing oneself, no boundaries, basically, losing oneself, no boundaries. And also it can show up in teams like consensus building, unless everything has to be like, everybody has to be okay with all of this, like kind of thing. And then sovereignty, the distortion for sovereignty is selfishness, is lack of awareness and understanding about anyone else, is narcissism, self-absorption. Which gets valued a lot in our society. Just notice as you're looking at these, the things that get valued in family systems, the things that get valued in organizations, the things that get valued, and sometimes you can even be like, how could a person like follow that person or let that person lead them? What they're looking for is the thing that they think is missing in themselves. They're like flies to a light, of what they're missing in themselves. This one, unity and sovereignty, shows up a lot in relationship, both working relationships and personal relationships. And you'll tend to sometimes have, if in personal relationships, you'll share, or even in my professional relationships, I lean more towards sovereignty. My partner, Noah, leans more towards unity. And he will self-sacrifice for the good of the partnership. That's not my problem. I will go the other way, and I will put up, strong boundaries. And so in our partnership, because we're both aware of this, we've actually helped each other come more to the middle. And so that can be the beauty of actually being in collaboration or partnership, whether it's professional and personal, or like Cheryl and I, in our work together, Cheryl's naturalness is more towards the water and the earth, and mine's more towards the fire and the air. And then they kind of come together and we get to learn from each other. And I can energetically, Cheryl, feel your water and your stillness and your earth. And I don't know if you feel my fire and my air, but it's like, when you value that and not compare yourself to that, it can actually help you embody it more.
Yes,
so,
and
I'll
we
pause
were
there.
talking
Go ahead.
yesterday. We were talking yesterday about how we can actually lovingly take each other by the shoulders when we're in distortion, and say, love, you're a volcano right now, or you could say to me, love, you're flooding right now. You're not just water. You're in distortion, and that's the beauty of sisterhood, is being able to do that with one another in love. Mm-hmm.
And so what are you all noticing? What are you noticing as you look at these about yourself, about society, like going back to like the valuing? I know, like valuing ourselves, valuing, like what are you noticing about what you're seeing for yourself, what you're seeing in relationships, and what you're seeing in society? Lynn, are you having a little glass of wine? Oh, wait, unmute, unmute.
I said, you caught me.
Oh, no, I didn't catch you. I'm going to toast you. I'm having a glass after this. I bought a special bottle of wine after this called Shift. Because I'm like, I want to drink some shifting wine as we're shifting the world. So cheers to that, Lynn. But not wine while teaching. Wine after, glass of wine after teaching.
Bubbly water while teaching.
Yeah, bubbly water while teaching. So what do you all notice? Give me a couple wisdom shares. What are you all noticing in this, either self, relationships, culturally, societal?
Well, I noticed with the overculture, for sure, valuing like everything on the right, and definitely in the world that I come from, in the world of business, the qualities on the right are, certainly valued, especially by the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. And they're then rewarded by how we pay people, how we review people, how we see
promote
people.
Right.
How we give people feedback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What about you, Lynn? Karen? Okay. Lynn, I know you have something to say over there. So Karen, and then Lynn, if you have something to add.
Sure. I'll be quick. I think what I'm noticing a lot is this huge uncomfortableness of, I'll say on the business side, Cheryl, too, with the unknown. And the pandemic has just been, it's just broken apart the fact that you can't just be on the right side. It's just, you can't even survive. And so this huge uncomfortableness with using intuition and not knowing and curiosity is needed, and it's being valued now the way I've never seen it before, and reading about it in all these, journal articles. So my hope is that through the crisis, the value of being balanced is here. And I think part of this, having language around it, Christine, and talking about it, is helping everyone to realize that that there is value there. And so again, I'm just really hopeful that we can really bring that to the forefront, and having the language around it is beautiful. So that's my observation, coming from the distorted male environment through a crisis to value the feminine.
Well said, Miss Karen Davenport.
My what I noticed is much more personal, and I was just looking at under the connection, the two distortions of healthy interconnection. I've seen myself bounce from the codependence, no boundaries, self-sacrificing, over to the selfishness, self-absorption, self-obsession, and sort of bounce back and forth without sort of coming into the middle. Particularly when things are not going well. I've seen myself bounce back and forth between those two extremes. So it's not like I'm on one side all of the time. It's a bouncing back and forth.
And if you were a kayaker, Lynn, what would that do? What would that create for you as a kayaker?
I guess I'd be sort of swerving around a little bit. I don't know.
I think so. I just had this vision of this kayak that's just like, no, which way do I go? Which way do I go? Like me.
Right.
North Carolina recently. I literally saw a kayak doing that. It was like going around in these circles. It was like going down these waves, and it was just going around in circles.
Yeah.
Yeah, great noticing. Great noticing. And so I give you that metaphor of the kayak for everyone, just to notice, right? To notice what you might be leaning into, or if you're going back or forth, or it even goes back to that place of like some of the distortions, like, am I feeling ungrounded? Am I feeling flooded? And it's like, what I love about the power spectrums is that if you hold that both these energies exist in you, and that you've been imprinted, we've all been imprinted. No one gets out of this without being imprinted. There's no one to blame for the imprinting. It's just part of, as I see it from a spiritual perspective, like we're like, okay, I'm dropping into the planet and I'm going to come, and I got this big heart. When I teach self-love, I always say we're born like this, and we're like, I'm coming. I can't wait. I'm going to give my gifts, and we're going to share, and we're going to play, just like in that, the visual of the stay focused on your part. And then you meet someone who's been here a little longer than you. And then, and it can even start before you even, actually take your first breath. And so that's just part of being here. And the spiritual teaching is you've come with the medicine that you need to heal whatever those parts are, to come back and remember your wholeness. And from that place, we're not here to save anyone. We're not here to rescue anyone. We don't need to fix anyone. For God's sakes, please, let's not do that. But through our own lives, our voices, our choices, and asking, I love this inquiry, how can I best serve the whole? How can I best serve the whole? I always would ask the question, how can I best serve? It's a very sacred feminine inquiry to make. And then Richard Rudd, who wrote the Gene Keys, I was reading in one of his books, and he wrote that question down. I'm like, oh my God, I love asking that part. How can I best serve the whole? And so I give you that inquiry. And inquiry is one of the feminine leadership. It's like a primary tool, because we're in feminine leadership, or I really believe it's wisdom. I call it wisdom-based leadership. We are not seeking answers. We are seeking wisdom. We are not seeking answers. We are seeking wisdom. And so that I leave you with that inquiry. And as a sorbet before we complete here, I wish we were really together for the whole week in person. I'm so happy that we have this digital platform to work with. I've been teaching and using Zoom since the very, very beginning. I used to do this on Skype, so it's great that I know Lynn, how long have we known each other? It's been a while. Heather, you too.
Oh, that's a good question.
So it's like almost like looking at familiar faces and new faces. And I love the technology. And I think it's like that part of me that's like, oh my God, I just want to share all of it. I'm like, oh my God, this is wisdom. There's so much of it. There's no rush. We don't have to eat it like, one of those crazy Las Vegas buffets. But I did want to give you a little sorbet to complete. So I'm going to just pull this up, and this will be for next time. This is the second model, and it's called the Feminine Leadership Archetypes. And this is when I teach feminine leadership, I often teach it. I like alliteration. So it's power, presence, and purpose. So we talked a little bit about purpose today, which is where we started at, with staying focused on your part and not taking it all on. We just talked about power. This gets to presence. And I do actually an 8 to 10 month whole journey into this, but I wanted to give you a picture of this glyph, which has 8 different sacred feminine archetypes translated for how we work in the world, in our business, in our teams, how we show up. And why these are important, you can kind of just start to look at these, is that this feminine energy, this feminine presence is what holds an organization together, a team together, a family together. It's what without it, things would just fall apart. They would just fall apart. But because they're not very linear, or in kind of those more good listener, team player, like those very traditional, like boring and they taste like cardboard. I mean, I went through MBA, I'm getting my MBA. I'm like, why is everything so black and white and just tastes like cardboard? Like, oh, good listener. There's like no energy behind it. And so I'm just going to presence these when we can give language to that you're probably embodying all of these right now. And you just don't have language for the deep power that the presence that is you is actually creating. So we're just going to focus here on this line, the one that goes to the north and the south. And the symbol in the center, it has a lot of meanings, but from a very basic meaning, it means to elevate through the power, wisdom, and love coming together. So thinking about elevating ourselves and elevating society, when wisdom rejoins power and it focuses on love and the truest sense of love, compassion, care, all of those things, that elevates our society. That is not my teaching. That is a wisdom teaching. And that goes beyond in many, many different traditions. So just looking here at space holder and intuitive illuminator, and maybe you can even look here at catalyst and advocate. So space holder is the one who holds the space. So think of it this way. A lot of the people I work with that are, they're usually women. Sometimes they're in HR, sometimes they're general counsel, sometimes they're in a role and they'll say to me, it's so weird. People just come and sit in my office and they just talk to me. They just tell me things. And if they'll, and ones that people I've worked with that are at the C level, to be like the CEO comes by, the COO comes by, the CFO comes by, or maybe it is the woman who's a CFO. Like there's like all these like very strong people. They're just always coming and talking to me. And I just listen, right? I'm a good listener. And I say, oh, that is your power of a space holder. You have this presence to hold space. You don't have to coach them, you don't have to judge them, you have to fix them. And it's so valuable. It's what mothers do for their families and for their children. The best parents do this. They hold space for them. The best teachers hold space. And so just considering that for yourself, like maybe you have been told you were a good listener, but like how, like if you were to like be like noticing how you're holding space. And also there's a lot of freedom that gives you because you don't actually have to do anything except for really hold the space, listen, and then witness, reflect. You don't have to have the answer. Because then when you marry that with the intuitive illuminator, this is where the intellect and the intuition is plugged into the higher intelligence. And you can't actually get all of this. So think of a moment in your life where you've had an aha, you've had a vision, you can see things, you know things that aren't logical, might not have anything to back it up, but you just know. That's the intuitive illuminator. It can see the things. I was talking to a doctor client of mine. She goes, I like basically told them this whole thing was going to fall apart in March and they didn't listen. And now it's falling apart. She's like, I could see it. That's the intuitive illuminator. And then I said to her, well, perhaps that system doesn't really value what you have to give. And perhaps you might want to go take those skills and gifts and give them to a different system. We're working on that, that part. And so just noticing that these two are very connected. And kind of, you can think of it like the earth and, whatever you call that, the universe, spirit, divine, higher intelligence, quantum field. And then this line is the catalyst and the advocate. So the catalyst, I always say, she's the one holding the lightning rod or the lightning bolt, and she will catalyze something. Think of it like you're shifting form. The person that says the thing that no one else is everyone is thinking but isn't willing to say, or you say that exact right thing that that's going to catalyze the situation or the relationship. And then advocate. The advocate is, well, it's an advocate. It's the one who is standing for others, standing for something, kind of standing and letting someone lean on you and borrow your strength until they can find it for themselves. This is the heart line. So catalysts without the advocate basically destroy and are always just causing chaos or chaos machines. when they have the access to the heart in the advocate, there's a purpose and a grounding and a love. And so the catalyzing is done with love. Catalyzing without love harms. Catalyzing done with love heals and liberates. And then the advocate, that energy is very grounded. It's very fierce. It's very like Michelle Obama totally, to me, embodies the advocate. So every year I choose one of these archetypes and says, this is the archetype I want more of in my life. This is the archetype I'm actually really proficient in, maybe over proficient. And so just because you can get distorted then. So just look at these as a sorbet and be like, if you were to pick one of these 4, or if one of these other ones are sparkling to you, this is one I want to know more about. This is an archetypal energy that I want to invite more of into my life. And that's where you can just start with it, to start to get curious and to invite that energy in. And then what I like to do is to find somebody that you admire that embodies that energy. So the teaching is this: what you see in other people. If you ever had an experience where you've watched someone speak and or teach or do something and like got tears in your eyes or felt very touched, it's because you're seeing something in them that is also in you. And this is also the antidote to comparison. And the question's always like, what am I seeing in them that wants to come alive more in me? And so this is why with the advocate, why I chose Michelle Obama, because I can watch her speak and I can literally feel what she's doing, and I feel it in my body. That activates your presence. Presence is not intellectual. It comes from the heart. It comes from the body. It comes from your radiant energy body from a yogic perspective. So it's presence. You can smell it. You can touch it. You can feel it. So the invitation is to go start to open up and find and explore who are the people, men, women, non-gender identified, doesn't matter, humans, you can pick animal spirits, animals can work too, that embody that energy, and start to see how they can help you open up more of that. So in ending, what we're going to do is have everyone just choose what archetype, feminine leadership archetype, they're going to choose to play with, and then we will end. So Heather, what about you?
I forget exactly what it was, but the wisdom one.
Wisdom advisor. Yeah.
Yes.
Wisdom advisor. All right, Rebecca.
That's also the one that I chose. The wisdom advisor.
Wisdom advisor.
Mm.
Perfect. Karen.
The intuitive illuminator.
That's a good one for you. I like that. I'm gonna send you a picture. I have a picture of the intuitive illuminator. I will send all of these when I teach them. They all have these amazing pictures and descriptions and all this other good stuff. But this is a good place to start. Lynn.
Let's see. I think I'm going to choose the coherency creator. I always like that one.
I could see that. I could feel that in you for sure. Kara says the intuitive illuminator. So we got 2 intuitive illuminators, 2 wisdom advisors, 1 coherency creator. Karen, how about you?
I choose the advocate.
Oh, that's very exciting for you. The advocate who carries the sword.
She's a little scary to me, as you know, but I'm choosing her.
I know. I love that. I love that. The one that scares us is usually the one that's calling us. So we'll have to have a wise woman tea about the advocate. And Brian C., do you have one?
Yeah, I kind of came in late to it, but I think the space holder, I've always had people kind of come to me and want to talk to me, but then I want to kind of jump in and help them. So I learned to like listen more and get more into that space holder.
Yeah, beautiful. That's great. The color of the space holder, Brian, is burgundy.
Burgundy, is that kind of like a red? Is that kind of like a red?
Yeah, burgundy is the mix of is a reddish with a little purple in it. So it's like a deep red.
Ah, the color of my car.
Oh. See, you're a natural space holder. And it's a very earth energy, you know, it's a very earth energy, stillness. So I love that for you. Great. And Cheryl?
Creatrix.
Oh.
It's very different for me. So yes, I'm gonna go out on a limb there.
Well, I'm gonna choose connector. Because my creatrix was out of control. She was just very busy last year. She's been very busy many years, so she gets a little imbalanced. So I'm going to choose the connector weaver. That is who I am embracing this year. So, all right, dear ones. Well, in my Lakota teacher taught me we never say goodbye. So my teaching from him was, his name was Sonny Rainier. He said, we always just say, I'll see you when I see you. So I want to say thank you so much for being here today, and to just, as you go into your evening or your day, to really know that you've already made a difference, to really, really, really feel that. And to just take a look around at the people that are here. And as you go through this week with Truth and Reconciliation, there's some other really amazing sessions going on. I invite you to participate and connect in. Stay connected to me through my podcast and other things, Feminine Power Time. But to really see yourself and know that you're standing with this web, and how we do this going forward is really together. It is the collective, and none of us have ever really totally done this. But I believe we have the wisdom in us to do it. And so in those moments that you might feel alone, or like it's all on you, or whatever that might be, just tell yourself, it's different now, and I'm doing this differently. And then we can find each other. It's called synarchy, but that's a whole talk for another time. So sending you off, I'll keep talking. So sending you all off with much love, and I look forward to seeing you when we see you. Good night. Good day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye.